In complete contrast to a statement earlier this week concerning a need for talks with North Korea over the nuclear crisis, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has said Pyongyang must earn its way into negotiations. That was at a special session of the United Nations Security Council. RT's Caleb Maupin reports on that from New York.
Well, the presence of the two officials made it pretty clear that the stakes are getting higher as we watched the meeting in the UN Security Council chamber. Now, we heard from U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. He emphasized that the United States did not want to go to war with North Korea, but that they will be increasing their pressure on the country.
That is intended to lead to diplomatic talks. In the meantime, the president's been very clear. Militarily, we are going to be prepared should something go wrong, and our military is prepared.
A representative from North Korea was able to take the floor at the meeting. Now, the representative from North Korea said that it was the United States that was to blame for the crisis in the Korean Peninsula, and that their development of nuclear weapons was only done to deter attack against their country. This is the representative of North Korea speaking in the UN Security Council chamber.
Our possession of nuclear weapons was an individual self-defensive measures of defend our sovereignty and right of existence and development from the U.S. nuclear threat and blackmail, and anyone is to blame for it. The U.S. is the one who must be held accountable.
Now, we heard from the representative of Russia, and he addressed the Security Council and emphasized that while Russia does not approve of North Korea's activities, its testing of missiles, its nuclear proliferation, that saber-rattling and threats against the country don't seem to be the solution, and that as long as the country feels like it's under attack and like it's under threat, it's not likely to disarm and give up its nuclear weapons.
Washington and its allies responded to 2 months of silence from Pyongyang by conducting unscheduled military drills of an unprecedented scale next to the North Korean border in October and December, combined with new unilateral sanctions and adding the country to the list of terror-sponsoring nations. All of these moves make you wonder whether they even want to find peaceful methods of resolving the crisis.
U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, in his remarks, accused Russia and China of not doing enough to help resolve the crisis by putting pressure on North Korea. This is despite the fact that Rex Tillerson outright rejected the proposal from Russia and China for a double freeze. Since the beginning of the crisis, Russia and China have called for a de-escalation of tensions by the USA and South Korea ending their provocative military exercises in exchange for North Korea ending its missile testing and its nuclear proliferation. Now, this proposal was outright rejected by Rex Tillerson, who said that U.S. talks with North Korea would not proceed with any preconditions. There would be no preconditions. He essentially ruled out the possibility of this double freeze as proposed by China and Russia. Now, Russia's President Vladimir Putin was speaking recently and spoke about the fact that the USA and Russia don't seem to be working together regarding the crisis on the Korean Peninsula. And when addressing that, he pointed out that often U.S. leaders seem to put Russia on the same level as North Korea and Iran in their international rhetoric, and that essentially the USA is coming to Russia for help with the North Korean crisis while not treating them with the proper respect and putting them essentially on the same level as North Korea. Tensions are pretty clearly high, as was illustrated on the floor of the Security Council in the proceedings that the world just watched.
Well, let's talk through some of what we saw today with Eric Sirotkin. Eric is co-founder of Lawyers for Demilitarization and Peace in Korea, and it's always a pleasure to have you on the program, Eric. Earlier in the week, as we've just been hearing, Rex Tillerson, the U.S. State Secretary, said that the U.S. is ready for talks without preconditions. Why the apparent U-turn, do you think?
Well, first of all, negotiations with preconditions misses the point of negotiations. I'm a mediator and a lawyer, and I'm involved in negotiations, and I think President Trump is demonstrating real ignorance about negotiating and how that works. The reason you have to sit down is to avoid these kind of problems, not set preconditions. We've been through this for decades here, where the U.S. administrations have often said, We first need them to calm down. We first need them not to have tests. We first need them to not test a nuclear weapon. We need a period of quiet before we sit down. The point is the noise, the proliferation, the weapons are the exact reason we need to sit down. And I think Secretary Tillerson got it right. We should be able to sit down and first talk about the wallpaper or the environment that we're sitting in, talk about anything, because that begins to build relationship. And I think we're facing a situation with those statements by the Secretary of State that would lead to talks being set up. And I think this is a further example that the United States doesn't appear to want a diplomatic solution and doesn't appear to want to sit down and talk.
What else was said? Tillerson stated that the U.S. rejects the Russian-Chinese proposal for the so-named double freeze initiative, while also saying Moscow should do more to help. Is that inconsistent, do you think?
Well, I agree that the international community needs to do more to put pressure on the parties to sit down, to demand that the parties sit down unconditionally. I mean, you have to remember the United States and South Korea and Japan and just a few countries have never even recognized the right of North Korea to exist, has not recognized them as a nation, has no diplomatic relations. So consequently, who you talk to and how you relate to them is always a little unclear. But the mutual freeze notion it's a good notion, and it can be part of negotiations. But realistically, again, it's just another example of preconditions. What should be demanded is talk and dialogue unconditionally so that you can go towards your common interests. Because in mediation or in any kind of negotiations, you need to start with one thing that's very important, which is what are your common interests? And the common interests here between North Korea and the United States is both arguably want peace, both arguably want safety and security and their borders protected and to be respected.
Okay.
I think you would get agreement that both sides want that commonality.
Can I put just another point to you as well?
I think you go from there.
Yeah, the Russian envoy criticized the U.S. for saber-rattling, saying, and I'll quote, "It makes you wonder if they want to find a peaceful solution to the crisis." Does he have a point with that? Do you think that other world powers are perhaps concerned by how Washington is handling the situation?
After 60-plus years of no treaty to end the war and just a temporary ceasefire in the armistice agreement since 1953, we are faced with that issue. Why has there not been a resolution and a permanent peace in Korea? And there's a lot of factors at play here. Korea is one of the largest importers of conventional weapons from the U.S. There's a lot of money involved in that. The U.S. military role in the region could be brought into question if there was peace in Korea, China, Japan as a region. There's a lot of factors potentially working against the idea of peace. However, as an international community and following the UN People's Right to Peace that was passed by the United Nations, we all have a right to demand our governments sit and negotiate and have peaceful resolutions to disputes. And this just isn't being required. No one's holding the United States feet to the fire to unconditionally sit down until there's a resolution to this issue so that we can work toward a non-proliferation and demilitarization of the Korean Peninsula.
Eric, thorough analysis as always. Eric Sirotkin, co-founder of Lawyers for Demilitarization and Peace in Korea. Thank you.